Hello there, my name is Bryn Jones and I'm one of the economics team at Long Road. The aim of this video is to try to give you a taste of what studying economics at A-level would be like, and to give you plenty of examples along the way to show you how and apply the subject it is. Normally I'd be meeting you face to face in college, and we'd have students there who are currently doing the subject who you could talk to. Unfortunately, that's not possible, and so here we are in my kitchen, but never mind, the explanation will be very similar. Economics is really important, never more so than at times of chaos, such as the financial crisis in 2008 or the COVID crisis that we have now. Economics tries to explain how the world around you operates, and it gives governments options as to what it can do to try and achieve its objectives. Before I explain the course, a few things. The first is it is an A-level course. You will be assessed totally on exams at the end of the second year. There is no coursework involved at all. You'll be assessed regularly through the course of the 2 years, but all of the result is dependent upon the exams at the end of 2 years. So if you're someone who likes coursework, this is more than likely not a suitable course for you. The second thing is that the course involves using numbers a lot. It is not maths, but it is using numbers. It's simple things like percentages, fractions, drawing lots and lots of diagrams. But if you don't like working with numbers, then maybe it's not the course for you, because 20% of the final marks in the exam are to do with working with numbers. Okay, and lastly, the exams consist of all sorts of questions: short answer questions, multiple choice questions, numerical questions, diagram questions, and essays. All of this we build up to slowly over the 2 years, and we assume that you've not done economics at GCSE. Very few schools do economics at GCSE. If you've done it, great, you've got a bit of a head start, but the teaching is done on the assumption that you have not done it previously. So the A-level falls into 4 distinct units. 2 units are to do with microeconomics. That's looking at economics on small scale, and 2 are to do with macroeconomics, which looks at economics on a large scale. So the first thing we do is we start by looking at markets and how they operate. And if there's one thing that anybody knows about economics, it's that it involves the ideas of supply and demand. And that is, after a few little introductory things, what the bulk of the first unit deals with. Any economy has to make choices. It can't produce an unlimited quantity of everything. And so what supply and demand does is allows the goods that are produced to be allocated to different people. So if you can afford something, you buy it. And if you can't afford something, you're one of the unlucky people in the society who don't get it. Okay? We look at what causes demand for products to change and supply. So during the recent COVID crisis, right at the start, supermarket shelves were stripped empty of toilet paper, of, I don't know, pasta, rice. Why? Because people were thinking, these are the things which I'm definitely going to need if I'm locked in my house for, you know, a long period of time. So demand surged, but of course the supply wasn't there because factories were producing their normal amount. There was some in warehouses, but once that was run down, firms had to increase their supply, and that took time. Now if you go into a supermarket, you can buy pasta, you can buy toilet roll, but for those few weeks there was an imbalance between supply and demand. And what you saw, of course, is that entrepreneurial people, you could call them, or I can't remember what the American gougers, that's it, price gougers, which is what Americans call them, took these products and advertised them on eBay for vastly greater sums than it costs to normally buy them. That's economics. If there's a shortage of supply and a great deal of demand, the price goes up. If you and your family use Uber, you'll know that the price is not the same all the time. If it's pouring down with rain and it's midnight, you'll pay more for an Uber trip than you will if it's sunny and 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So we look at supply and demand and we ask how a price is determined. Is that good or bad? Why are some prices volatile, go up and down, and why are some prices very stable? Okay, bananas at 86p a kilo, they've been that for ages. Price of petrol up to 140 something, now down at below £1 a litre. Crazy price, we haven't seen that for ages. Okay, we then say, right, most markets operate fine, but sometimes the government doesn't like the outcome in the market, and the government will say we need to intervene. The government acts in a paternalistic role. In other words, they say we're the father figure, we know what's good for the economy as a whole, so they step in. An example that's affected you quite possibly is the sugar tax on fizzy drinks. And what the government said was people who consume too much sugar get obese slowly but surely over the years, and if you become obese, you then will cost the national health money. Okay, you will need treatment for your obesity and the horrible side effects that come from obesity. And so the government says what we need to do is to try and stop people getting obese. So the government can step into a market and it can do things in order to try and stop people consuming as much of it. So the first thing is they can step in and they can pass laws. So I can go out and buy a can of beer, you're under 18, you can't. I can buy glue, you can't. I can buy sharp knives, you can't. Okay, so the government steps in and has age limits. It may well have time limits, so it can say you can buy this product up until 11 o'clock, but after 11 o'clock at night, alcohol, you can't buy it. Okay, so the government steps in and lays down rules. But it can also do other things. It can make the product more expensive. So the sugar tax was in 2 bands. High sugar, we're going to go up by 12p a litre, lower sugar levels by 8p a litre. And the idea there, of course, is that if the price goes up, you can't afford as much, so consumption of the product goes down. And if you don't consume as much fizzy drinks, then you're less likely to get obesity. What else can they do? Well, you could subsidise healthier things. So the government doesn't want us to drink fizzy drinks. What if they subsidise water? So rather than the bottle of water being 50p a bottle, it was only 20p a bottle. What else can they do? They can provide information, so you can have labels. So if you buy cigarettes, you can see the packet of cigarettes. It's disgusting. It's got pictures of, you know, people's lungs and ulcerated mouths with mouth cancer. It's horrible, right? And it says smoking kills, or smoking can damage your unborn baby. They provide lots of information and a clear message. Maybe the government could do that. Maybe on every bar of chocolate it should say, you know, eating too much chocolate will make you obese. But they only picked on sugary drinks. You could criticise it for being a policy which was very narrow. Maybe it should be much broader. So we look at how markets operate, supply and demand. What happens if markets don't operate as governments want, governments intervening, and then we evaluate. We say, how successful has the government been? And the sugar tax has been successful, but in an unanticipated way, because what sugary drinks manufacturers did was they reformulated their recipes so they had less sugar in it. It was below the limit at which the tax kicked in, and so they didn't have to have the tax. So people are still able to buy their sugary drinks, they're still able to buy it at the same price, but the sugar content is less, which should mean over the years people will consume less sugar and they're less likely to get diabetes. So that's the first unit. That takes us up to about Christmas of the first year. The second half of the first year is dealing with macroeconomics. Macroeconomics looks at the whole, the big scale, and we look at the UK economy and we ask, what does the government want to achieve in the economy? And any government, doesn't matter whether it's Tory or Labour or any other political persuasion, wants to achieve 4 macroeconomic objectives. Now these will vary over time. At different times, different things will be more important, but 4 macroeconomic objectives. The first is they want the economy to grow. If the economy grows, we produce more, we become richer, we have a higher standard of living. Talk to your grandparents about what their life was like when they were your age, and you'll realize that, you know, life is much, much easier nowadays. Central heating rather than having to get up and make the coal fire in the morning. Okay, private cars rather than having to catch the bus everywhere. Huge range of foods in the supermarket, huge range of leisure activities you can do. Okay, our standard of living is much, much, much higher than it was in the 1950s, for example. So the government wants to achieve that. At the moment, of course, I'm recording this on the 8th of June. We are about to go into a massive recession as a result of the economy shutting down. So the economy won't be growing, it will be shrinking. And what the government is going to do in the next months and years is to try and expand the economy back so that we get back to where we were. So economic growth is really important. It doesn't matter whether you're a developing economy or an advanced industrial economy, really important. The second thing allied to that is the government wants lower unemployment. The more we produce in the economy, the more people have got jobs. The more people have got jobs, the more tax they'll pay, the less the government will have to pay out in benefits. So low unemployment is a key objective for governments. Also, there are some horrible effects of unemployment, long-term unemployment, low self-esteem, people losing the will to work, childhood poverty, huge increases in ill health. So unemployment, long-term unemployment, is a bad thing for an economy, and so the government will try and keep unemployment low. Thirdly, the government wants prices to be relatively stable. We want low inflation. That's slightly more technical, but they want that. And lastly, they want our trade with the rest of the world to be roughly in balance. Unfortunately, at the moment it isn't. We import far, far more than we export, and even if you take into account the services we provide for the rest of the world, we have a trade imbalance. So that's one of the things which we're not succeeding at the moment in this country. Lately, 2 other things have come to the fore. Apart from these 4 main objectives, the government is having to take on more and more environmental concerns. The idea of, should we build a 3rd runway at Heathrow Airport? It may well improve the economic growth and make us a richer country, but at what cost? Will it be at the cost of us, you know, having making irreparable damage to the environment by the increased air travel that would entail? And lastly, there is always the question of equality within the economy. You know, different groups, we're not equal in our society. There are people who are very rich, there are people who are very poor. There are groups, ethnic groups, who are far poorer than other ethnic groups. The latest COVID crisis has shown that if you're black and minority ethnic, you're far more likely to die of COVID. Is that genetic, or is it to do with people's background, their housing, their living conditions, and the poverty that they may be living in? We shall find out later. But equality is a major, major issue. And then lastly, we say, okay, this is what the government wants. What can the government do to achieve this objective? Oh, sorry, these objectives. And we look at 3 policies. They can alter the amount of the money in the economy by the amount they spend, for example, on the A14, upgrading it, or on building HS2, or on paying money to people who are furloughed. That is costing the money. It's costing the government huge amounts of money. Okay, or it can take money out of the economy by taxing people more. Your income tax, VAT on almost everything you buy, special taxes on cars, or dumping when you take stuff. If you're not an individual household, but your business, and you take stuff to the dump, you'll be charged the landfill tax. The government, via the Bank of England, can change interest rates, and if interest rates are low, people go out and spend more, and so the economy is more buoyant. So that's something. And lastly, there is a long-term policy the government can use. It's called supply-side policies to improve the quantity and quality of the resources we have in this country. So it can have better education for people. It can have more training for people in work. And that second unit takes us up to the end of the first year. We might begin the third unit a bit, but basically those are the two first year units. I won't go into as much detail on the second year units, but a quick rundown. The third unit looks at businesses, so it's back to microeconomics again. It looks at different types of firms, large firms, small firms. Why do some firms grow and others don't? Are takeovers a good thing? Mergers? Why do some, what restricts some firms from growing? Is it that the market they serve is very small, or is it a lack of finance? Can government do anything to help that? We look at different objectives that firms have got. In the old days, it was always profit, profit, profit. But now we hear about things like corporate social responsibility. You can't just do something which is going to damage the environment or is going to impinge negatively upon various groups of people in the country. So what motivates businesses is something. And then we look at the most technical bit of the course, and that is market structures. Luckily, we leave that fairly late because it is very technical, very diagrammatic, and very problematic. But hey ho, every syllabus has got some sections. And we look at the labour market. What determines wages? Why is it that some people with some skills can earn, you know, six-figure salaries, and other people who do maybe more important jobs for society earn considerably less? You know, this COVID crisis has shown up that many people are key workers, not just people who earn high salaries. If hospitals aren't cleaned, then diseases spread, and no matter how good the doctors and nurses. So that hospital cleaner, who's more likely on only a little above minimum wage, is more likely someone we should value more highly. Is that via salary, or is it in some other way? So that's the third unit. And then the last unit looks at globalization. We look at the history of globalization. Why are we so dependent upon other countries, and other countries are so dependent upon us? Why do we both import and export cars, which seems rather stupid? We look at the benefits of getting cheap goods from overseas, much better standard of living, fantastic choice when you go into supermarkets. You go into somewhere like Primark and they've got the latest fashion made in Bangladesh, and it's, you know, in the stores really quickly. But at what cost? What about the people who live in Bangladesh? What about our over-reliance on overseas? For example, when we couldn't get PPE because there are no major PPE manufacturers in this country, and we were totally dependent on China and other Far East manufacturers. So has globalization gone too far? We can ask on that as well. We look at the organizations that oversee international trade, the World Trade Organization, the World Bank, the IMF. We look at the argument of, should trade be free? Should any country be able to sell anything to anybody? Or should you protect your home industry? Donald Trump has turned world trade on its head. You know, he's imposed huge tariffs, which are basically taxes, on imports of various goods. French wine was hit with a 25% tax back in April. Iron and steel manufacturers and aluminium manufacturers, or as Americans call it, aluminum, they would have found it much harder to sell in the States because of the tariffs they put on that. And then we look at poverty and inequality. So we look at this issue of inequality, but on a global scale. Why is it that the disparity between the richest countries and the poorest countries is so great? Why is it that countries develop and other countries don't? Why is it that some countries start to develop and then plateau and don't come up to the higher level? So China's the second largest economy in the world now, huge. But if you look at income per head, it's way down the league tables. So they've still got a huge amount of growth to do if they want to get to the standard of living that someone in the UK or Western Europe has at the moment. And that's about it. We ask, what can governments do to help development around the world? So I hope you can see that this is a very broad-ranging course. It's theory and then application. The application is to everything. As I said, I'm sitting in my kitchen. I can find examples of things that, loads of things that come from overseas. I can find things that the government has taxed. I can find things that the government has made cheaper to subsidise. Economics is all around you. And if you do economics, you won't be able to put the world to rights, but you will be able to help explain why things are happening in the world and possible actions the government could take to achieve what they want and make our lives better in the future. Thank you for listening. I hope you choose to do economics at long run. Bye now.